Hi, this is the week 4 video for IT45 and 386. This is basically the last week of the first project, which is going to wrap up our concepting and all your materials you need for entering into the 3D world, of creating your models and your textures and getting in the game engine. So what you see on screen is a sample image of what I would like submitted for the project. So on the top left is my concept artwork. That I grabbed the table, I found some textures that I applied onto it. It's in some type of perspective. And down here, I actually created my orthographic views, my side, my top, and my front. And then here are the textures that I used on top of this image, or if I, built my concept art from scratch for my final concept art. So you'll see in this area that I have all access to all my textures that I'm showing off that I used to build my concept artwork, and all the textures I'm going to use to apply on my model when that phase comes. So we've already created our raw textures that we're going to use. This concept artwork tells us how we're going to apply it onto the model when it's done. And also it's going through that whole feedback and approval phase of when you're submitting your ideas to like the art director to create something. And then we have our modeling perspectives, our modeling references. So our front, side, and top. You should be able to look at this table and then down at these what are called orthographic views, meaning there's no perspective distortion. You can see here how the table, as it gets away from the camera, is kind of shrinking, the lines of perspective. But here you see that this table has no perspective distortion. And so this is what you're going to use to model to make sure your model is actually proportionally accurate in all three views, meaning, it's scaled correctly. And you'll eventually, at the end of this, I'll show you how to crop out these images, or these orthographic images, so that you can bring them in when it's time to model in Maya. So again, this is basically the project deliverable, along with your concept artwork and your references that you've gathered. You'd zip them all up, and this is like the final, you can call it like a tear sheet, the final concepting sheet. This contains everything in it: your concept artwork up here, your textures that you used in your concept, and that these are now my textures are laid out, that they're easy to reference and grab when it's time for texturing. And over here is my modeling references, my orthographic views that I generated from my concept artwork. So stuff that's more flat, like a blast door, there might not be a lot of information when you get into the orthographic views, but it's still important, especially for, as you looked at the concept art for the blast door, they had very specific dimensions with the width, height, and thickness, and you have to adhere to that to actually get your asset submitted. So it's important to figure out the relative proportions of the dimensions with these orthographic views to make sure your model is proportionally correct. So I just wanted to kind of go through what everyone's been creating and see how stuff would turn out, when you make these kind of orthographic views. So obviously here with this garage, you can see like the side view would be this wall here, kind of a flat view of this wall. The front view would be this side of this open garage door, and the top would be looking down like this. And then you can actually scale out the dimensions. Kind of very similar to this I found online. You can actually draw out the dimension lines so that you know exactly how to, for example, this table, it's 36 inches thick, 64 wide, and 30 high. Then you can actually model to proportion in Maya. Again, the blast doors are actually very, I think they're like 2.5 meters wide, 2.5 meters high, so like perfect squares in that. But you can see like this is a 3D model, and to drag out the models and start modeling is you're going to have to know the proportions to work with. This is a great sample. The student created the blast door in perspective in Photoshop, and he actually added that extra dimension here, the thickness, to represent, so you get an idea of the width in relation to the thickness in relation to the height. And then he actually put in a silhouette of a human here, and this is great because now we have the relative proportions of an average size human in regards to the door. And it's going to be really helpful in understanding if this door concept is correct, and also in the modeling phase if it's going to look great when it goes in game. So for most of the time you're going to have your concept artwork in some type of perspective view like this. It really gets a good full understanding of this object and all three of its dimensions. And then you're going to look to lay this object out in its orthographic views. So again, blast door is relatively flat. But it's still very useful to understand how they would look at all different angles. Bookcases. Okay. Here's another student. He looks like he already modeled before, and he was talking about how he understands the importance of getting these views out for modeling purposes. So I say he already went ahead and did the top down of the train car, and this is actually the texture looks like on the top of the car, because you can see down here in the front view this is the same color and texture. And here's the the side view, and here's the front view. And now we can understand how this train car looks in all the different angles, the orthographic views, and also like here understanding the dimensions of this ladder relative to the main car, also the wheels. And then he's even considering how these like main sections of the roof. So you see these three main sections, each of those kind of have wood planks. Then you can start figuring out, your models and textures, like the proportion of this window to this train car. So it's very important. So you're gonna take basically your most up-to-date concept artwork, and start with that in your kind of this reference sheet, this concepting sheet. And then you're also going to zip up all your reference artwork that you used. So this is basically my references. I started with a table. This is kind of like the table I wanted to work with. And this is a good reference I found of just the proportions and dimensions of it. But basically I was going to start with this image, and then I found some images on cgtextures.com, like a tileable wood, some tileable tiles. I figure I want to make some tiles in the middle, and then I want some blood on it, and I want the table itself to be kind of beat up, and I want the tiles to beat up. So I kind of found this interior concrete stuff. And what's important to note on CG Textures is that some textures already have their alpha. So especially with the splatters and the decals, the splatters and stuff, you see if the background is white, so you're going to actually have to use like the magic wand tool and delete that white. Or if you do a darkening blend layer, that white will actually disappear because lights aren't used in that darkening blending layer. So again, that blending is here. If you use a darken, that whites will go. But usually just use a magic wand and you delete the white areas. But you see in the decals section, we have this checker pattern, meaning the background has already been deleted. So if you bring these in, you have the benefit of not having to delete, and just you're able to apply it. All right. So, but name, class is the first project. Got I would probably even put in text here saying, front, side, top, and maybe organize a little bit more so the textures are more grouped together. But I'm going to build this whole page from scratch basically in this video. And again, I'm actually going to build this concept artwork too, so it'll reinforce all the workflows on how to just do texturing with photos. Okay, so the size of this image was around 1500 pixels. That's about a good size. Usually to see the size, you see it's at 50%. I could blow it up. Like this is the size at 100%. So he's pretty big actually. Maybe something like 1,000 by 1,000 pixels would be good. Yeah, now that I think about it, because you're gonna want to post this up on the forum. So I already got a default. I don't know if you have. I think I created these defaults. I don't think you have access to them. So let me just go to default photo size, and we can do this from scratch. So do pixels. Let's just do 1200 by 1200. Resolution 72, because we're going to be, this is for posting on the internet. And everything else we can leave alone. All right. So I'm dragging my my File Explorer off the window. Basically, I'm bringing in the table that I'm going to start with. Again, this workflow is a little different. This is CS4. I got to do this like this double drag kind of technique, but for you guys, it should just drag right in. So anyway, you're probably creating your concept artwork already, but I'm just going to be creating it within this drop sheet. But basically, if you did pop your concept artwork in, you'd scale it down. Not too small yet. Just pop it in there so we can start with it. And you can always scale down. Scaling back up is sometimes a problem because you lose information scaling down. So leave the white background. We could do another layer. Do a gradient tool. You can pick whatever you want. Or just do a flat background. I'm just doing something just to at least get some color. And so that the reason I also do that is so you can see if like some images have a white background, to know how to deal with that also. So with the gradient tool, you click up here, you kind of select your colors. You can click on these boxes here if you want to pick different colors. And then you kind of just do this drag from one to another to create your gradient. And the farther off you drag it, oh no, how it is if you start, where you click from will be like the leftmost side of the gradient, where you end up is the rightmost. So if you want more of the right hand side, hence the darker side, you do something like that, do a quick drag on this side. Or if you want more of the left hand side, you start over here more, or you could just do a full across the wipe across to get more of a clear gradient. But I'm gonna don't want so much black in mine. All right, this might be good for now. Anyway, so now I can see that there's this white around my table. So I can use a magic wand, a low tolerance, delete it. And if I zoom in, you see that there's like white around the table. So we can either mess around with the tolerance, which is looking good. And I might just add a little feather. I undid that, by the way. Just do a little feathering just to make sure if there is a little bit of white. Yeah, actually maybe no feathering. It's actually creating a ghosting effect. Let me go into history, undo that feathering. And let me just see how that looks. That looks good. I got a little clip up here. But if that's bothering you, you can actually like click on the table, and now we can, let me slow down a second. I clicked on the layer now, and it selected the elements in the layer, which now it's this table, so it wrapped around the table nicely. I can modify feather, maybe a few pixels, 3 pixels, and delete it. Oh, my bad. You gotta invert. Select invert. Let me delete that, see if it got rid of the rough edge. A little bit. It's still kind of rough. You can always, I use the soft eraser here. It's not really a big deal since it's concept artwork. All right. So I have my table with the white off around it. Now, there's two areas now to build out. The textures and the actual orthographic views. Let me knock out the orthographic views first. For those of you who don't want to get involved in the already understand the texturing a lot. But all right, so I'm going to duplicate the layer, and I'm just creating this layer for use with my perspective. So first off, let me pull down a grid line from the ruler. If you don't have a ruler available, it's under View Rulers. And what I'm trying to do is trying to line up this image. Make sure it is as flat as I can get it. So I can see there's some distortion here. So let me see if rotating solves that. And I rotate it a little bit, and up here, you know, that solved that issue up here, but the legs down here are still not lined up entirely. So let me use the distort tool, and basically I'm just pulling out this one side a little bit. So basically using a mixture of the transformation tools. You can try out the perspective, distort, a little bit of rotate. Basically, I'm trying to line up the front end because I know that this was right at the camera. All right, so now I know that this is relatively correct. A little bit. You can see the legs kind of taper in a little bit, but I got rid of some of the major distortion, and I can seek to try and create some perspective from this. All right, so now we have the front. It depends how you look at this table, if this is like the front or the side, you know, it's kind of relative, but I'm going to say this is the front of the table. And he's lined up right nicely with us. I don't really care about the back here. I'm really looking at what's right up close to the camera, and I lined it up nicely so I can start to build on top of him. So I'm going to look at kind of the primitive shapes that creates this table. Got to click to apply the transformation. And I can identify, you know, I can identify rectangles and some either rounded edge rectangles or some cylinders. And this is actually really good practice to break down these objects into their primitive shapes, because that's exactly how you're going to start modeling this thing. So one thing I note is this is the I'm looking at kind of the main parts of the table. So I'm going to create a new layer, and I kind of selected, try to figure out what the biggest part of the table is for me, our main part of the table. And I can start with this. I'm just going to pick a color. It doesn't really matter the color scheme. Basically, I'm only picking colors so that I can, because I'm distinguishing all these main primitive shapes. So you see here, I just selected different colors and basically use a paint bucket or a brush to identify all these main parts of the table. So to paint bucket, and I've identified that this kind of under part of the table is about this size in the front view. I'm going to go ahead and identify the next biggest piece is like the top of the table. You have to realize that the top of the table isn't that thick. He's only about this thick. I'm not looking at it from the top down view. I'm looking at it from the front view. And then I drew this out, but I didn't have him sit perfectly. So I'm going to use the arrow keys and just push him right down, sitting on the kind of the base of the table I created. And then it doesn't matter. I'll just create a darker brown, or whatever. Again, whatever color scheme you want. So now I've identified that kind of under big support part of the table. I've identified the top part of the table. Now I can work on a leg. Now remember that these legs are still in perspective, so they don't really taper like that. So I'm just identifying maybe from here, and I'm going to use the arrow keys to push them around a little bit. Now you say, oh, I didn't go as far out as here, but you have to understand that due to the perspective, we're actually looking at this side part over here. So if I move him over, you see that he kind of fills the full width of this table leg part, and I just move him over to meet where the under part of the table is I created. So I'm just going to create another material, paint them. And either I could build this whole table leg out, or I could just move it over piece by piece over to this side. So either way, maybe I'll just move them over now. And then to do that, let's see, turn off show transform controls. You have more area to click on. You can hold down the Alt key and it'll create a duplicate of it. And then you can zoom in and use the arrow keys to really situate them. All right, and now we can continue on. So he's got kind of this, if you take a look how he kind of rounds here, he rounds down a bit. So you can either try out the, is there the rounded, nope. I think you guys in the updated version have the rounded edge rectangle tool, but either way, you can just select a brush, do a hard edge, and we're just gonna clip the ends a little bit. There. And there. And I should probably done that before I duplicated him. But you think about that too. Make sure you modify a shape before you duplicate them, to the full extent until you're fully happy with it. And that's also going to be a workflow in 3D. So next is this kind of rounded little part underneath him. Create some other color for it. Paint them in. All right. We can hold Alt. Oops. Interesting. Might be too small. You might zoom in. Yeah, you have to zoom in pretty hard on them. All right. Just use the arrow keys to push them into place. All right, next we just have the whole rest of the leg down. We do have this other section that kind of extrudes out, rounds out, but we could just add him on top. He's not indented, like this guy was kind of indented in, so he kind of had dealt with a little differently. This guy's coming out, so let's trace out kind of how big the leg should be. And pick another color. Great. Just double check his width. He actually looks a little wider. If he goes from here, he actually goes from there, right? It looks a little fatter. Maybe something like that. And we could adjust up here, but he's not as wide as this upper part is definitely bigger than him, and we have him fleshed out at this. So this might be a little distortion in the photo. So for now, I think I'm just going to leave him that width. All right. Then again, we can hold the Alt key, duplicate, move them over. Use the arrow keys, push them in place, and now we just have this little part down here. Something like that. And I just drew out the little collar part down there and changed the color. Paint bucket it. Oh, maybe for this one a paintbrush would have been better. And I got rid of the selection. Got it going there. Yeah, he looks a little wide. I would probably make him a little tighter to the leg, but you get the idea. So anyway, I'm going to Alt, drag him over. And line him up. If you're not sure if they're lining up, you can drop down a grid line. Looks pretty good. Okay. So I just created, I could hide this table, and now you see I have my front view created. So let me adjust my guidelines a bit now so that they sit right on him, on the actual top and bottom of this object. And the side too, we're going to want to clean up all the guidelines. So now that I've created my front view, actually I've established my width and height of this table. So just from this one view, even if it's not 100% accurate, because if I bring him back, there was some distortion here. But if I stay true, if I'm really happy with this one orthographic view, you can create your others directly from it, because using the guidelines, I can keep my same width and height. So this right here is establishing the height. So let me just name this layer front. I could duplicate this layer. I'll call it side, because the front and the side share the same height. So as long as I keep him in line with him, my page isn't too big. I'm going to turn on Show Transform, and I'm going to scale. No, I'm not going to scale because I'll shrink the legs down. But what I will do is you can press the Enter key. What I could do is identify. So I have the height. All I really need to identify now is basically the length of this table. So if I bring a line down here, basically identify that this is the length of the table, because I've already identified the width. Sorry. Bless you. I can go ahead and make my side view. if I determine that this may be my length. But due to perspective distortion, this might not be accurate, but at least it's a good starting point. So basically, I want to keep the leg thickness the same. Everything is the same. This part of the table, this is, all the dimensions of these parts are the same. It's just it's not as wide or long. So I actually want to like chop out a middle part of it. What you could do is you can grab a section. I have this side layer selected. I basically box selected part of it. I can click the move tool and just arrow key it to the right. And it's almost like overwriting that center area of the table. And I'm actually shortening it down. You gotta be careful because at some point the middle part of the table is going to stick through on the right hand side, or it's going to overwrite the left hand part of the leg right there. So about this is as far as I'm going to go right now. Click off, and you see that he keeps the same height that we've established before, and all the proportions are the same, but he's just a much shorter, distance. And so we're starting to establish his dimensions on this angle. So he'd probably be a little shorter. So we can just do the same technique. Select and move him. I'm going to leave it something like that for right now. You're going to have to eyeball it a bit because we are in perspective, but you're basically establishing your dimensions right now by doing this. So I'm getting my front, my side. The side width here is longer than here, but again, this has this perspective distortion going on. So if I click back, I see I have my front, my side. So I can move my side down. And basically, between the two of them, I have the length and width established. So what I could do is I could leave the side down here. I could duplicate him, move him up here, and actually rotate him 90 degrees and place him into position in line with the grid line I have established, and then use the arrow keys to really just sit them right on top of each other. Okay, and then once I did that, I can basically use these guidelines I have here, apply. I can grab this one here, move him up. Let me get rid of that transform control. And now I have my grid lines established. Create another one, pop them there. And if I like this front, this side, now I have the top view established. So I basically can drag out a selection of in here, bucket tool, create a new layer first, fill him, and I'll call him top. And this side copy here I just used to get my dimensions. I can delete that. And now I have my front, side, and top that are in the exact proportions to each other. All right. And let's see, this one I'm done with. I was just using that. Not duplicate, delete. All right. Side, line him up to the grid line here with the front view. Just create another grid line here so that we can line the top up to him. It'd be nice if I could have the front and the top right next to each other. Gives me more room up top to gives me more room up top to display other stuff. Well, in this case, for some reason my other, well, because this is a 1400 by 1400, I was able to fit all three laid out like this. Oh well. I'm going to go view, show, get rid of the grids for the moment. So I could just kind of find a position for these without seeing them. All right, I'll leave it like that for now. All right, now I created my orthographic views of this table. Let me bring the grids back. I'm going to show you how to export from these. What's important is when you export these out is that you crop right on their size M. And so to do that, you want your grid lines hyper accurate. There's going to be a little, there might be just like off a pixel or two, and that's fine. It's you're just trying to get it really accurate where if, a little bit of difference in proportion you won't notice it in your model. I mean, if it's, if you have all this extra space, so if I like crop out this front guy and this front view and be really accurate as to his dimensions on it, and then maybe this side guy I crop out all this extra white space around him, they're not going to line up correctly, because that white space will throw it off. So you have to spend your time lining up your grid lines really accurately, and also with the top of the table. All right, I have my grid lines lined up. You can zoom in on these guys. Let's make sure to save this first. All right. So your crop tool for CS6 is a little different, has some advanced features on it, but basically the same thing applies. You're just cropping, even if I didn't crop it correctly, maybe if this was off over here, now you have access to, you see my grid line wasn't exact. So I go in here and I'm adjusting the crop to be like exact on this object. Then you can press the enter key and you crop this image, and then, so which means that that's all it is. There's no white space around it. Is the exact size this. You could save this out. Like this is my side view. So I would save this out as a PNG, you know, and this would be whatever the name of your asset is. For me, it's this table, you know, then this would be side view, you know, save this out because you're going to use these in Maya. You're going to import them in and use them. So again, I went back into history. So now I'm back to my original, and I'm going to drag out, and then I can press enter. Here's my top view, save it out, same way. I can go back in history, and then I'm going to crop out here and crop him out. I noticed my gradients in the background there. You can turn that off if that's distracting. If you're not going to want that, you know, see how easy it is to turn that off, and that's a white background. But anyway, that's how you're going to save out your 3 views, and you're going to submit that with your first project. So you had your side, your front, and your top, and you're going to save that out appropriately. The trick is to really just create one view as really accurate as you can based on your reference images or your concept artwork. And then from that one view, you saw how I was able to create the other view. Like from the front view, I was able to create the side view because I've already established the height. And then I had to identify what this next dimension was. And then I had all 3 dimensions established, and I'm able to create the top view. Or you start from any view, whatever's easiest for that one. So let me hide my grid lines again. And that's how you're going to create your orthographic views and how to create them as separate images for use in Maya, and also, again, for submitting in your project. And that's the essence of what I'm doing. I'm going to jump into the texturing part now, but for those of you who already get that, basically that's the end of the video. This is kind of the sheet I want, this kind of concept sheet, and then I want these separated out, the side, the top, the front, by cropping them out and saving them out separately, and, you know, zip everything together along with your original concept artwork and all your textures and other references that you established from all this stuff. And now I'm going to spend the rest of the video just talking about texturing, basically how I textured this stuff onto this table from these textures here by scaling them, rotating them, distorting them, and applying blending layers, like how to get the blood on top and the scratches on top. Okay, so I'm not going to deal with the wood texture because it already has a wood texture, but for some of you, like I know you wanted to change wood to metal, and this stuff is the same. You basically find tileable texture like this wood. And the basis of the tileable, the whole point of it is not only in the 3D world does it tile, but I could alt and double click it and move him and line him right up and do the same down here. And you notice that the tile, the textures repeat. So they start to look like there's no seam in here. I did this really quickly. It's off like a little pixel or two, but you see that it starts to build a larger texture, even though there's separate textures. So this is done a lot in modeling for games. So get used to finding seamless or tileable or repeatable textures. Also, I posted some links up to help you find some textures. Basically, this seamless textures here is just a Google image search on seamless textures to see what's available. But obviously, you would whatever material. So in this one, this is seamless texture wood. I would do a more specific search on wood or metal or what have you. The next link is to FilterForge. So this is a really amazing Photoshop plugin. You're not going to use it, but here's a whole library of assets that people have created that's available. And the really cool thing is the specular and the normal map is also available. So this is seamless. So if I click here, view seamless, you see it's just repeatable over and over again, which makes for a larger texture to wrap around an object. And you have some variations to pick from, and you have your diffuse, your normal, and your specular, and you can download these and use them for free. So we'll go through how to build these for your own, but this is an awesome resource, for you to just start grabbing if you can find appropriate textures to help you out and build your project stronger. It's good to understand how to build them yourself, and it's also good how to find resources too, to know both ways. Sometimes you can just find stuff you're looking for, sometimes you'll make it yourself. All right, and the other one was the Wasteland 2. People were talking about wanting to see that video, so this links to the YouTube video of the first main video for Wasteland 2, the showing the gameplay. All right, anyway, back to texturing. So I'm going to drag in my textures. So as you saw before, I have a blood splatter, I have a wood, tile, some cracks, and some chipping that I'm going to use for these. All right, so I'm going to bring one in at a time. Here's the wood. I'm going to bring them up here into my image. Now he's really big compared to what I'm making. Scale him down. He's just a texture. I'm going to pop him up here. The table's already made of wood, but this wood, when I go through the modeling process, I'm not going to have access to this wood for my model. I'm going to have to create my own texture. So you have to identify what textures you want to use. Even though I'm not going to use this on my concept artwork, I still need it for my model, because you need to identify everything that will be applied onto your model. So this is my wood, but I'm not going to apply it to my concept artwork because I already like the wood on it. So I'll move on to the next one. Here's the tiles. Bring him in, close him out, scale him down so he's more appropriately sized. All right. Also, it's probably good to start grouping stuff. So I'm going to call, this is actually my concept. So here I have my orthographic views, so I can group them, call them my ortho, top, side, front, drag them in. See, now that I dragged them into the group and minimize the group, they're not out here anymore. It's easy to start seeing how I'm building stuff, and I can move them underneath here, keep my concept artwork stuff together. So this is my wood texture. This is my ceramic texture. Okay. This is my actual texture reference that I'm leaving up here in the corner to show, but I'm going to duplicate him and move him, move him over here because I'm going to apply him onto my table. So here I'm building out my textures, and then this is actually more my concept that's going on here. So I'm going to create another group, move these under here, call these my textures, and I can shrink that up. So now I have my two concept artwork images I'm working with, and my textures over here, and my orthographic over here. You can even group up your background stuff too. But kind of I leave my background stuffs on the bottom, and as I build folders, I move them down, and so the layers I'm currently working with are up on top. So it just, you can just build up a lot of layers quickly, and less confusing the better. So this ceramic, I'm using part of my concept artwork. So he's actually still a little big to be in relation to the table here. I'm going to scale him down a little bit. And it's something like this. He's going to be a little centerpiece on the table. Just kind of scaled correctly. And then I really like the distort. You can try the perspective. But I'm a big fan of the distort tool because you kind of manually are creating your own perspective. And it's good practice to understand perspective. It helps you a lot in modeling. So basically, I widened the section of the tiles that's closest to the camera because that's the way perspective works. Stuff closer to you appears larger. And then I'm kind of aligning him with the table. The table's like slightly offset a little bit. And then those in the back shrink a little bit because things away from you shrink. All right. So his perspective is a little, his angle here is much sharper than his table. So my perspective's a little too strong. So I kind of open him up a bit in line with the way that the table seems to be working. So let me click off him, take a look. Looks good, I like it. So now I applied my ceramic texture onto my table. I just did a normal. You can cycle through and see what these are doing, but at these different blending modes, I'm just using my middle mouse wheel to scrub through them and see how they're all affecting the layer. But this normal is the best for the ceramics because they kind of are sitting on top of the table. They're real. I could try doing a layer style on them because they kind of sit embedded in the table. So I could kind of give that illusion or try to. Get the angle of light a little different where the shadow's over here. The shadow is over here, just it didn't look good to me. So maybe something like this. You could try playing with the parameters a bit. Lower down the opacity. All right. You can try these different things, see if any of them really add anything to you. To me, they don't really. One of these glows, not the outer. The inner glow is not bad, but really light touch to it. All right. So I like my ceramics sitting in my table. Let's move on to the next thing is I want to damage the ceramics. So I'm going to bring on this kind of concrete damage. So it'll be close enough to ceramics underneath, of that, or either porcelain or some type of material that's could kind of look a little bit like concrete when it's broken away. So first I bring in the damage thing over here because it's going to be a texture reference. I can duplicate it, and one of them will go into my textures here, and the other one will go over here for use. So you see I hide textures are all gone. All right. So again, I got to scale him up appropriately for how he would, whatever his purpose is. For me, he's going to be applied on the ceramic. So he obviously has to be close enough in size to the ceramic. Then I'm going to go and distort him too. To make him look like he's sitting on the plane of the table. So that looks good. Press the Enter key. Again, I can kind of scrub through the blending mode, see if anything interesting besides darken looks pretty good. Normal. I like darken only because normal kind of has this white areas around it, and it looks like it's sitting on top. And I don't want to look like it's sitting on top. I want to look like the stuff is damaged underneath. So I'll darken it like there's shadows. Then again, I can try and apply a layer style onto it. Maybe a bevel, but a bevel makes it look like it's like extruded, like it's coming out. But if they have a reverse, so direction up, maybe direction down, I can try and change these bevels out to find one that might be interesting. This pillow emboss might really look well because it's like the underneath parts of the ceramic, like the outer nice part was chipped away. This might work. Let me see the difference between up and down. See, a real up down makes it look like it's inside a bit more. So let me see if it can get this effect to look right. Just a light. You always want to try and go with air on the side of light in these effects because they can look pretty bad pretty quickly when they're like really extreme. But if you zoom out, it doesn't look too bad. So hopefully it looks like the tile is being kind of torn into a little bit. So let's move on to our next effect. So we kind of have dirt. Next is, last is really, we got like this stain and we got blood. And it really just depends on the layer, how, the way you want to layer this on. I think the blood would be last. You might want to do dirt underneath and then a dirt on top because, you know, maybe it got dirty and there was some type of violence and then more time went on so that more dirt was applied. It depends, you know, again, the story you want to tell. So let me duplicate the dirt or the stains and take one of them and put them in the textures folder. I can take this other one and see, where do I want to apply it. So I'll take the big stain. Maybe I want the big stain right on the ceramics a bit. So again, I'll scale it down to fit the piece. I'll distort it so that it looks like it's sitting on the table a bit. Right now I'm just kind of staining the top of the table, but you might want to do it again and do the front here. But anyway, he looks good, like he's sitting on the table. But this line kind of doesn't look good, so I might actually distort it some more and actually make it look like this line is actually like the edge of the table almost. See if that does anything good. Zoom out a bit. Looks pretty good. Hey, what looks really good is at the corner of the table here. This looks like the corner is really dirty. And I said that corners and creases and edges are really where the real damage and dirt happens. So that looks good. Maybe I'll duplicate this layer and move them over onto the other side of the table. And I can flip it horizontally. And I could apply the same thing on this side. It might look a little too obvious. You know, that kind of the same stains on both sides. So, I mean, you can like mush it around to try and hide the fact that you're reusing it. Or you could like go in and paint on it and hide different parts of it. Let's see if all these different, so multiply makes it look really dark. The red looks kind of neat, but not really the effect I'm going for. That white's interesting. That looks like almost like the table's cracked. So I'm getting some effects I never really thought of before, but the standard darken, which is very similar to the normal in this situation, but I think I'll just do darken. And just to change it up a little bit, I can use the clone stamp tool, shrink them up a little bit. Maybe try and duplicate him out over here and mix it up. And I could take this layer and mush them around a bit. So hopefully they don't look, hopefully I gave it some variety so it doesn't look the same. All right, so he's looking pretty good. We got the bashes in the ceramic, dirt, splatter. All that's left is the blood splatter. Bring him in. And I gotta zoom out because I can't even see his edges. Let's bring him down a bit. Got a nice little spot right here for him. And he's got this white border. So as I said before, sometimes that white area is not bad. Like if I bring it up, if I'm using it on a table and I use a darken, you see that white just goes right away. Because in the white colors just don't do anything, so they go invisible. But since it's the color difference is so distinct, I got whites and reds. It should be pretty easy to do like a magic wand on this guy. So let's do a magic wand. Let me play with the tolerance a bit because I saw some of the areas are. Let me raise, trying to see what the tolerance is doing. No, that's even worse. Let's lower the tolerance down. All right, that should be good. I'll delete that. There, we have a nice blood splatter, more or less. There's a little bit of whites in here, but at least it got rid of that really awful white boundary to it. So I can duplicate him. One of them will go into the texture. And the one up here will go up and be used in the concept artwork. The one that's in the textures right now, yeah, I'll just work with the concept artwork. I was going to say you could select the one that's in the concept artwork and or in the textures. Sorry, just do a darken or something. You'd see how this would look. So you could almost leave this as part of your textures, even though it has like a blending mode on it, because that's how you're going to use it. All right, so anyway, we're up here. I got my blood splatter. Let's move him all the way up to the top. You saw as the dirt's sitting on top of him as I move him underneath the dirt. So it really depends what how you want this effect to work out. So let me darken it. Zoom out a little bit. Scale him down. I don't think he really needs to be distorted that much. Just make sure that there's some speckle that's off the table. So either I shrink him, or you can just I could just distort the image some more. So anyway, I have him sitting underneath the dark areas. So again, it could be a dark and multiply. I could go through these and really see the effect, but usually a darken or a multiply. In this case, the multiply shows more. The darken really cuts out. So I like the multiply. It's just, do I want him above or below the scratch? Is actually, since we're using the multiply, he actually shows up a little better on top. So you can use that one blood, or you can duplicate them out, use them a few times. You see, as I duplicate him, he gets darker. So if you really don't like the look of it, always think about doing multiple layers on top of each other, really darken something. And if something's too dark, again, there's the layer opacity to bring it down. So maybe there's aged blood over here. I'll show you maybe two different styles. Let me raise the opacity on this one. So maybe on this one on the left, we'll do aged blood. So to do that, we need to do a hue adjustment because we'll make it a little brown. And you see he's affecting the whole artwork. So what you want to do is right click on it and say create clipping mask and make sure he's right above the layer you want to affect, which is this blood one. So we can change the hue a bit to find a brownish hue. And let's say play with the saturation, maybe darken it. And then the other thing is you can play with the layer opacity because maybe the blood fades out over time. You know, so here's like an aged blood, and maybe over here this is fresh blood. And again, you don't want it to look the same, so I can change the transformation. You can flip it vertically, flip it horizontally, vertically, and let's distort it a little bit so you kind of lose how this shape originated. And click on the blood here. You can mess with the shape a little bit, although blood's a little hard, I'd imagine. Maybe not. Alright, so he looks like a shorter, fatter blood stain. More of a bleed out. Maybe this is a gunshot, and this was a knife wound or something. Yeah, I don't think you need to play with the opacity a little bit. So we have a fresh blood wound over here, and we have like an old aged one. The other thing is maybe the fresh one was done. You could have them sit on top of this dirt or under it. If you want to sit on top, you might have to do like a normal. You might have to use some other effect. That's kind of interesting. To make the blood look like it's sitting on top. Actually, that's interesting. It looks like a really dried out blood stain. But maybe do a multiply and maybe duplicate the layer to really darken it. So now we have a fresh blood stain, we have an aged blood stain, we have the dirt cracks in this beat up piece of tile. So I have my concept artwork, I have my textures. The only thing left is let me create another group because I've got to see all these layers I built up with the concept artwork. Drag them into the group there, shrink the group up, call this concept. Now it's a nice clean, I might do some text, that's where I was putting my name in. 0.5, first project. So I'm going to want this Photoshop file to see how you built it. Again, you can crop out these orthographic views, save them out separately, and save them out as PNGs, your orthographic ones, and then save this file as a PSD, but also save it out as a PNG or a JPEG, right? And then zip everything up along with your reference photos, and load them up. I'll create another work in progress week 4, and then throw all that in a zip. But all I want is outside of the zip, I want that concept art PNG or JPEG. I want the image file of this, so that when people are scrolling through it, everyone is getting a real snapshot of everyone else's project. So you have a zip file that contains this PSD Photoshop file of this, the PNG version, also the image file, the 3 image files, PNG or JPEG, of your top, side, front, and then a whole directory, a whole folder of all your reference images that you gathered to make it this far. And take a zip, throw all that into a zip, and just leave the PNG version of this concept sheet out. And again, its dimensions anywhere about 1,000, 1,200 by 1,200, 72 pixels, so that when you load them up in the forum, it's a nice size so people can scroll through, I can comment, everyone can see what everyone's up to. And that ends week 4. And then that's it. We're going to move into, I'm going to update this. So this week 4, you just get it done by the end of the week, even if, by Friday. If you need extra time, I mean, it can bleed into here, but actually most of you people are ready to go. So this week 5, I'm going to change into the intro to Maya and modeling, and give us an extra week of modeling, because our UV, there's always going to be a hang up somewhere in here. So we'll give an extra week into modeling and UVing and texturing. So actually this is the last week. Everything I went through, creating this sheet, zip everything up, create an image file of this that sits on top outside of your zip when you upload it. And then that's the first project for the class. Thank you.